Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
Welcome back, listeners. Today we're sitting down with a UW alum, Bryan Hassler. We're going to talk about his career and his life, which spans the public and private sectors of Wyoming's energy industry and really across the West. He's played in the spaces of the governor's energy advisor, led the Wyoming Pipeline Authority, and had a lot of leadership roles at different companies. So we'll talk about all that and hear about how Bryan's time at the University of Wyoming really led him to that career. So Bryan, thanks so much for being on our podcast.
You bet.
So you are a UW graduate. So can you tell us what you studied and how did your time at the university shape your career path?
Well, I'm more of a non-traditional student. Started out in bioengineering and pre-med and migrated into chemistry. I spent 2 days in the College of Education and spent a year and a half in the College of Business seeking an industrial engineering degree. And then had a bunch of buddies who were in the petroleum department and went to work for Amoco for a summer with an industrial engineering moniker on my head and enjoyed it. It paid a lot of money for that time in school, and the rest is history. I got a bachelor's and a master's in petroleum engineering.
Okay, so you got an undergraduate. By the way, I don't think that is that uncommon. I mean, I think the average student changes their major 7 times, which I've heard.
Yeah, I guess, I hit that number pretty well.
Raising the bar there. So, yeah, I definitely didn't change it that many times, but I had my own changes. But so you had 2 degrees from the University of Wyoming?
Yeah, but okay. Both of them in petroleum engineering.
Petroleum engineering. Yeah. Okay, great. So was it just your friends, or was there anything at the university during your time at the university that kind of piqued your interest in energy?
Well, energy's all around us. At that period of time, kind of early 80s, you were seeing kind of a spike in crude oil and natural gas. Everybody thought we were at peak oil, peak gas. And, when you looked at a utility bill and your utility bill was higher than the rent in the place that you were at, it made you seek answers and kind of see where you might be able to apply your thoughts and efforts in the future. And
how you can make a big difference. Okay, I have to tell you a story about peak oil. So the first time I ever heard that term was later. I was in college. So the idea of peak oil, I haven't heard that word for a while now. No. But I read a 1-page article on it that my dad gave me, and I didn't sleep that night. It's a terrifying concept.
Yeah.
For those that haven't heard of this, because it's not talked about as much anymore, how would you describe peak oil?
Peak oil is the established resources at the time are depleting. Technology doesn't give you an opportunity to extract the tougher oil and gas deposits across the world. And, at some point in time, you'll have to ration demand with the available supply.
And it was going to happen really fast, right? Like rationing and prices spiking, it was going to happen fast.
Yes.
And there was going to be like food insecurity. And what the concept never took into account was really human ingenuity.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you really throughout your career probably got to see a lot of impact of innovation in the energy sector.
Yeah, and I think government policy had a lot to do with that.
Sure.
When I first got into the field and was drilling and doing production engineering, fracking was a relatively new technology, especially in tight gas sands, which carry a tremendous amount of reserve base, but were technically difficult to extract relative to the cost component in. So tax credits assisted in terms of developing coal bed methane and tight gas sand resources in the early 80s.
I had not heard that. That's interesting. Okay, so I don't want to jump too far ahead because I want to hear about how you got there. So you're at the university, you've gotten 2 degrees in petroleum engineering. So then talk about your early career and anything you learned about energy in that first job or two.
Yeah. So my early career was get a bachelor's in petroleum engineering, only to have the market drop for petroleum engineers.
That happens.
I walked around probably 50, 75 different oil and gas companies in Denver for a month and a half. I graduated in December and decided, okay, I'm going back to school. I had a Society of Petroleum Engineering scholarship. I was working for the Civil Engineering Department, taking a look at in-situ uranium recovery, and I taught a mud lab and worked at the Tar Sand Institute. So I was going to school full-time and working for jobs to keep things moving. Yeah.
Wow. So the uranium, that was part of a job?
It was, I worked for Professor Hassler in terms of modeling in situ flow fronts for uranium.
What a huge impact that's had on Wyoming, and it's ramping back up.
Yeah. 40 years later.
You're before your time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got, and you're not the first person that graduated with an energy-focused degree and the markets crashed, and then you went to school and furthered your education, and then what happened?
Then I was one of the few individuals in the department. Because of a master's degree, it kind of set me apart from the rest of the folks. Took a job with what was, at that point in time, Mountain Fuel Supply Company as a production engineer in Rock Springs, Wyoming.
And so then I noticed as I was preparing for this that in the middle of your career, so you had this long first job. Well, let's start there. Would you want to talk about anything? What did you learn in that job? What did you work on? What did you learn about energy? Let's start there.
Yeah. So, so you want to put your best foot forward. And, I did a lot of just kind of circling around. So I was a production engineer. I did some drilling engineering. I did some reservoir engineering. I was just trying to soak up opportunities and experiences across the energy sector. So I did a lot of midstream modeling, processing, looking at fracture effectiveness in the field. I jumped to the pipeline side of the business and did a lot of rate making for development of pipelines. Looked around, and most of the people in that particular department had been there 30 plus years. And I said, I don't want to get trapped. So I popped back into the E&P sector and did a lot of A&D work. And decided ultimately, I was told by one individual that they wish I had more gray hair to advance me further, because companies back in the early 80s, and you still have a few of them, it's not what you know, it's how long have you been here? How did we move you? So I took that.
A&D. What does A&D stand for?
Acquisition, divestiture.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Keep going. Yeah.
So, that first step when you've been someplace for a decade plus, it seems like it's a cliff you're going to step off with. I had 2 kids. I was in Salt Lake City looking around, and I looked for a couple of years and decided, here's a company, Barrett Resources. They want my expertise in midstream development, marketing, trading, and took that step off the cliff, and it worked out well.
Nice. Okay. So then when I was preparing for this, I noticed you had quite a series of positions in companies that were about to be acquired, or maybe they were acquiring something else. It looked like a lot of jobs that were maybe a year long each. So is that when this started?
Yeah. So it's, Barrett Resources was predominantly just an exploration production company, but we had a very good marketing trading business we built, and we created a lot of the infrastructure opportunities to move our supply from constrained basins into the marketplace. As the marketplace was developing, you had open access on interstate pipelines, which meant as a producer, you could move for a fee your production to an end-use market. Whereas before, the pipelines controlled all the end-use market, they controlled the supply, when you could produce, how you could produce. So it became an exciting time in terms of understanding how this early marketplace was changing the dynamics of especially the natural gas business.
And What percentage of pipelines today are open access? Do you know? Or
well, 100% of them are open access to some degree or another. Interstate pipelines definitely are open access to everybody. Now, that being said, you might inject your natural gas supply into an interstate pipeline, but not have firm transportation to get out of a constrained point, at which point in time you're relying on somebody else that has made the commitment, both the financial commitment and the intellectual commitment to procure long-term firm space that may or may not be in the money.
Interesting. Okay. So let's go back to your career, because I think we can talk more about infrastructure in a minute, but let's talk about your career a little more. So you had this kind of business development or M&A, or what did you say? A&D. There's like a lot of acronyms here. Yeah, but basically experience buying and selling parts and companies and resources, and which is of course part of the energy sector in general. So you got into this, it seems like that skill set was really used for your next many jobs.
Yeah, my expertise became less petroleum engineer oriented and more infrastructure oriented. Yeah. And, the people I worked for, these various companies, call it, Pinnacle Energy, what is now Oventive, Antero Resources, they valued the expertise I brought with respect to moving supplies that were in constrained areas, call it the Piceance Basin, the Wind River Basin, the Powder River Basin, even the Barnett Shale. When we jumped down there with Antero, they relied upon my expertise, one, to make sure once a well was drilled, the supply was flowing almost immediately, two, make sure the infrastructure was there, or go out and procure the infrastructure through long-term pipeline contracts to move supply to marketplace. And that the sooner you can move supply, the better your return on investment is versus drilling a well and then having to wait on infrastructure.
Sure. And I think this is really interesting because you just never know where your career is going to go, like from petroleum engineering, where you're not as much focused on infrastructure build out, but you can learn that in your career if you have that fundamental basis.
Engineering gives you kind of that baseline opportunity to create value in other sectors of whatever industry you're in. Always be on the lookout to learn and participate in new opportunities. And if you become a lifetime learner, it provides you with some tremendous opportunities in the future.
That's really well said. Okay. And this is one of my favorite hobby horses because I went to the University of Oklahoma and I took classes outside engineering to meet like an honors requirement. But, the University of Wyoming has really invested in some new courses, including for petroleum engineers that focus on things like leadership. And I think my college self would have thought those were fluff, but actually there's so much opportunity besides like the core science and engineering as you move through your career. And a lot of it you can learn on the job. Like you said, if you're a lifelong learner, you're going to learn, but there's also, what would you say to college, Bryan, that would you recommend taking courses like that are really broad if you can fit them into your schedule and you're not too busy switching majors?
Yeah, it's. I think it's tough to get a degree in 4 years. It took me 5.5 years.
100%. I was a fiver, and I started with a lot of credits to start, and I still took 5 years.
Yeah. So along the way with those 7 different major changes or whatever it was, I don't know. I earned 175 hours over the 7 years that I was at the University of Wyoming. Some of my favorite classes and some of what helped ease kind of the engineering discipline were in the English department. Creative really? Writing, analysis of satirical literature. So it just put a different piece of the mind to work, and was a little bit more relaxing than the rigidity of an engineering program.
Uses a different part of your brain in some cases too. And I'm just going to admit this. I like reading and writing and all kinds of stuff. So that was like, you kind of lean on what skill sets you have. But when I got out and into the world, it turned out I enjoyed those things. And so ended up being like the default report writer and memo writer for the other engineers, but I enjoy it. So,
yep. And it's part of communicating through an organization as well.
Sure.
So if you've got those skills and you put them to utilization, it exposes you to different parts of the management structure and provides you some venues to move forward in a career too.
Well said. Okay, young engineers, so it's not all fluff. But I do want to go back to your career again. So you worked for a number of companies and you've named a lot of them. And then at one point you actually transitioned over to the public sector. So you were executive director of the Wyoming Pipeline Authority. So can you talk about that? Like, what led you to make that change?
Well, the pipeline infrastructure in Wyoming was quite constrained at that point in time. I met an individual who had some issues with royalties under lands we were developing in the Powder River Basin by the name of Tom Swanson. And as they were kind of reinstituting the Wyoming Pipeline Authority, he reached out to me and said, hey, would you consider coming to work with us and helping us reestablish the Pipeline Authority and move forward and bring another pipeline companies together to find solutions to our constrained supplies?
And I don't think I realized that it was the Wyoming Energy Authority had existed and then it was not. And you were like relaunching it? Yeah,
so it was implemented, I'm trying to think, clear back in the 70s when Wyoming really had some constrained instances. California seemed to be the primary market. And, if Kern River hadn't come along and established corridor and built to the western U.S., I think Wyoming at that point in time was prepared to build its own infrastructure to relieve the supply constraints. And what does that do for Wyoming? When you look at federal lands, Wyoming gets 12.5% or half of the 12.5% federal royalty rate, plus they've got state lands. So it all builds upon the revenue stream that a state needs to run and serve its people.
Sure. And specific Kern River pipeline it's a natural gas pipeline.
It is.
Yeah. Okay. Carrying from Wyoming out west.
Opal, Wyoming into California.
Yep.
And it's actually, other than a small piece around Las Vegas, there were two major construction periods for Kern. So it's actually two large diameter pipelines that parallel each other.
Nice. Okay, so we're already starting to move into this, but you have a really unique viewpoint and expertise on Wyoming energy and natural gas, as we're already talking about. So as a state, we have a lot of challenges. We also have a lot of opportunities. I love to talk about our natural gas sector in this podcast, but it would be better if you do it, but because you've lived it. But let's talk about the importance of midstream infrastructure, pipeline storage, transmission, and what it means to Wyoming's energy competitiveness.
Certainly, without infrastructure, natural gas is very tough to carry long distances. We on the Pinedale Anticline, we had 3 wells that we transported by truck just to establish the validity of the leases in the early 80s. What did that become? Over time, it became the tremendous resource base, the Pinedale Anticline, with 3,600 wells plus and counting Jonah Field. So it's, I can remember Jonah, they installed 8-inch surface line for 50 miles to bring their first production online and understand the tremendousness of the resource base and how to develop that resource base. If you look at the Powder River Basin, coal bed methane production, explosive growth 20 plus years ago, no infrastructure really. So a lot of the infrastructure was built as the resource was being developed. If you understood how tremendous the resource would be, you were out procuring transportation on available outlets that enabled your supply to flow competitively over your other oil and gas companies there. And I'd like to say that I communicated a lot with geologists, engineers within the companies to understand just how that flow is coming on to better position ourselves, to put ourselves in a universe where we'd buy leasehold, we'd develop it, and then we'd sell. So that was the model associated with a number of companies that I've been part of. And while you tend to take a barely subsistent salary in those particular efforts, the upside with respect to stock and shares is tremendous and truly gratifying when and if you can kind of convert what you've been doing into dollars.
Yeah. Okay, so then that's totally different from going to the public sector and working for the Pipeline Authority. So is there anything else you want to say about like the opportunity? Now that the Pipeline Authority doesn't exist, I guess I should say, it's been rolled into kind of a mix, the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, working with Wyoming's oil and gas producers, and then the Energy Authority. But from having the experience both on the private sector and the public sector side, what do you see as the biggest challenges for Wyoming's energy sector?
I think policy certainly has a lot to do with how do you advance forward, but it looks like Wyoming has embraced early stage development, uranium nuclear reactor in the western part of the state. Embraced multi-use corridors for both electricity and natural gas.
Yeah.
When you look at probably the biggest constraint, it's one, federal acreage, lack of a solid U.S. energy policy that changes with every administration. A lot of these projects can take 5 to 10 years to develop before they're usable. You can take Anschutz as a case in point, $300 million plus.
The wind farm, just Chokecherry, Sierra Madre.
In terms of permitting and right-of-way procurement over the course of 10 years. There aren't many individuals that can take on that magnitude of investment, much less public or private companies that are well endowed with an ability to put capital to work. It's just tough. And then I think you've got to look at the energy industry has been bashed horribly over the course of the last 20 years, whether it's oil and gas, whether it's natural gas-fired generation, there's coal. When you look at it, we need every resource, especially in this day and age, available to keep our energy supply consistent, prices affordable, both in the electric sector and in the, say, natural gas and crude oil sector, and move forward. And that takes talent, which the university develops over time, and then it takes a recruitment effort to get that talent in. And then that talent is to understand that, early on in your career, well, a 40-hour work week is nice. You may have to work. I tell my older kids, they complain about working 42 hours a week, and I'm going, gee, I used to do that every 2 days. And when you think of there's a 43-day timeline to drill a well back in the early 80s, you're doing that 40 days in a row. So it's a commitment. Don't think everything's going to be easy, but it's rewarding when you can look back on it.
It is. And I think it has gotten so difficult to build energy infrastructure. I don't know how this is all going to work, whether it's natural gas pipelines or other kinds of pipelines or electricity transmission. Something has to give here.
Yeah, I think electricity transmission is probably tougher.
Yeah.
Because it's above ground.
Yeah.
People don't want it in their backyards.
But they do want the energy, and they want the AI, so how is this going to work?
Yeah, so a lot of these data centers are building inside the fence.
Sure,
their electric generation, and then they'll procure backup either through diesel generation or some form of alternative energy to get that 99.9999% reliability.
It's 5 nines.
Is it 5 nines?
I think so. 99.999.
Okay.
So just 0.001% of the time they're willing to accept failure from electricity, which I think is like 8 hours a year.
Yeah. So it's, are they willing to accept it?
Not really.
No, but they acknowledge that for 100% reliability, the
cost gets too high. Yeah, because you have to have so much redundancy.
Yeah.
I just went to a summit actually put on by our friends over at the Hobbs School of Environment and Natural Resources, and we were talking about this very topic. And 100%. And the thing is, some of these centers, the scale they're looking at, like 500 megawatts or a gigawatt, that's like 2 power plants.
Yeah.
And so to have that level of backup and transmission, let's say this, it's not going to be boring in energy for the next several decades.
No, it will not. It will not. And the growth in just electric demand from these data centers is going to outpace anything we've seen in 30 or 40 years.
Yeah. So on that, so that's a challenge and an opportunity. How do you see academia and industry and government and the public sector generally best partnering to help the state of Wyoming and really the nation on energy issues?
Well, I think the government had a delegation go to I think Taiwan and Japan here just a few months ago, letting the rest of the world know that you've got some of the cleanest product on Earth, and that it can be transported and moved onto a ship and taken across international borders and the sea through liquefied natural gas. That's a start in the right direction.
Let's talk about that, because we haven't talked on the podcast. We've talked about this before, but you are really involved and you have a lot of knowledge about this. So let's talk about that. So what you're specifically referring to is Wyoming's natural gas and its environmental footprint. And its environmental footprint is a lot bigger than just methane. There's all kinds of work on reclamation and water and community outreach and community engagement. But let's talk specifically about the environmental and specifically greenhouse gas footprint of Wyoming's natural gas. Talk about what we have to offer as a state from our natural gas sector, particularly from the producers on the west side. And you were at, full disclosure, you were at the company that's now PureWest Energy.
Yeah. And we had a specific focus on reducing what was already a low methane intensity footprint even lower, because we saw that especially the European countries had strict regulations with respect to where they were procuring natural gas, who they were procuring it from, and what its environmental footprint looked like. So PureWest, our commitment to even a lower methane intensity rate than what we had when we pulled Ultra out of bankruptcy. We also digitized the emissions.
Talk about what that means.
So, it's hard to take somebody's word for what is going on without validating, any particular concept. So we had a number of companies in there that were validating what we were producing, and then they were validating leaks and losses that we might have throughout the system. We had a real intense workforce working under Kelly Bott at PureWest with respect to leak detection on equipment, and then a robust blockchain environment that we put together in conjunction with third-party vendors that was able to document from each wellhead what that resource looked like, what the methane intensity looked like, and provide the world an opportunity to buy either a digitized low methane intensity characteristic or by the physical supply and the digitized characteristics to enhance their environmental impact and imprint on the world as well.
And it's not just a theory, it's actually happened. There is a company in Europe that has purchased from PureWest Energy these credits, and they're essentially using them to offset or prove that they have a lower methane product or a lower greenhouse gas product. And I think they're a methanol producer.
The details escape me. It's been a few years. But PureWest just announced an initiative with Gunvor, I believe, one of the world's largest trading houses, and they're going to work together to bring this low methane intensity product to the world.
And they also announced a project with a data center in the southwest part of the state, Prometheus, and Frontier Carbon Solutions or Frontier Infrastructure, all working together on essentially providing this low methane intensity natural gas. So you have very low upstream emissions. And then if you do carbon capture and storage, you really can have a natural gas fueled power plant or data center that is not having hardly any emissions at all associated with it. And so it's kind of what people have been looking for. And it's interesting to see this investment by our energy companies over the years actually leading to new industries for the state. But I was on the trade delegation to Taiwan and Japan. And what I can say is that there was a lot of interest in buying Wyoming natural gas, but they do want to make sure, you have to prove that you actually are meeting these low methane levels. And, there's competition even from other states in the U.S. So Alaska has a huge push to build an LNG facility. They don't have the pipelines in place. It's going to be a huge effort, whereas we already have our natural gas production. We have pipelines going toward the coast, but we can get some molecules to LNG facilities now, but we really have opportunity to grow that. And the reason that I think what really piqued interest from Taiwan and even more so Japan was that lower methane intensity. It's a different product, and they really seemed interested in that while we were there.
Yeah, and I think they look at infrastructure, and one of the detriments to not having a national energy policy that supersedes 4-year political environments is that we have no West Coast export facilities. Jordan Cove was voted down on a technicality after they'd spent over $200 million developing that project. California's against development of LNG. You've got Costa Azul on the Mexican coast, but it's infrastructure constrained. And when you look at, one of the things, and I think you and I have talked, you look at hydrogen. Most pipelines aren't built to manage hydrogen.
Right.
When you look at the desert Southwest and Southern California, a lot of that pipe that's been in the ground has been in the ground for over 80 years. So it's 30 years beyond its normal useful life, and maybe even 40, 45 years, subject to a lot of leaks, disruptions. If you want to export more gas into, say, Costa Azul and have them expand that facility, you're going to need new pipe. If you're going to build new pipe, you might as well build it hydrogen ready. So that at some point in time, if we flip the switch and become a hydrogen resource economy, that pipe can carry hydrogen and natural gas to a destination point where it can be exported to other countries.
That's really interesting. And this is why it will never get boring in energy. There's always like the future build out, the future markets. And I think we're on the cutting edge with some of our natural gas and infrastructure work happening in Wyoming to serve customers outside the state. So we have to look outside the state, don't we, Bryan?
Yeah. That's 450, 500,000 people.
Oh, we have a little more than that.
Consume
not much.
A very little piece of the energy that's produced within the state.
Yeah. Yeah, very little. So is there anything else you want to add on energy or infrastructure? I think we could also talk a little bit about giving back and leadership and stuff like that. What do you think?
Certainly. Yeah, I encourage young people to get involved in community efforts very early on. It's hard if you've got a family and everything, but kind of take a look at what drives you as an individual. When you look at both my first wife, Pam, and who's carrying on that legacy, our bent is education, and our bent is just kind of, I guess, the psychological imbalances that we have within our society, and people that need help that aren't getting it through government. So when you look at, where we put our money and resources, it's in, educational and behavioral science, so to speak. We give every year to specific institutions, including the University of Wyoming, Mount St. Vincent, a children's home, and Denver Academy, a school for kids with learning differences. And then we're looking to support equality in life. We want to make sure that our kids have an opportunity to be who they want to be when they want to be without having to worry about what the government might do there. So it's it's a balance, certainly, as you proceed in life, and as hopefully everybody that pursues a career from the University of Wyoming and every place else, as you become wealthier, so to speak, you've got a bit more income to disperse and help others that are in need as well.
You can always use your time to help these organizations.
Yeah, truly time is time, talent, treasure. It doesn't have to be money.
Yeah.
Just it helps round you as an individual. I think if you involve your kids in opportunities across the world, particularly my kids, we went to Juarez, we went to Central America building homes. And it's good for our children to see the plight that some of the world's human beings are suffering and see it early on, because that'll help them get involved in those type activities center as well.
And you don't have to go too far from home. We just did a SCR, like our staff did I just worked at the soup kitchen in Laramie, and you wouldn't believe your friends and neighbors can be in there and have some food insecurity. So there's lots of ways to give back. So the other thing that you give is you spend a lot of time with professionals, me mentoring other people, basically as much as we ask. What advice would you give to a UW student or early career professional who is really interested in energy, really interested maybe not infrastructure? Hopefully they're interested in infrastructure, although sometimes it flies under the radar till you get out in your career. But what advice would you give them if they were wanting to make a difference? Like, what should they do? What should they study? How should they think about their career?
Well, energy's become so complex. You don't necessarily have to be a petroleum engineer or chemical engineer to be involved in the oil and gas business or in the energy business. It's become logistics oriented, getting supplies in to drill a well on time. It's become environmentally oriented. Whether it's putting your natural gas attributes on the blockchain, whether it's becoming an environmental resource specialist to take a look at the vegetation and animal life that impacts energy development anywhere, whether it's pipeline, drilling a natural gas or crude oil well, coal, you look at uranium, they all have their challenges, and it takes kind of a village, ecologists, accountants, finance people, engineers, whether they're petroleum engineers or whether you say, well, I can learn the petroleum part. I'll become a mechanical engineer because it gives me an opportunity to build that infrastructure, and I'll learn everything else on the side or with the company that I'm working for.
You learn a lot on the job. I feel like you're also giving a plug to some of the credentials offered by the School of Energy Resources, like our Energy Minor, which is open to any student across the University of Wyoming. You don't have to have that technical background. You can be from any discipline. And we've also been ramping up our collaboration with other units, because that's a cool thing about energy. It's not going anywhere. It's always changing. We have real opportunities and challenges now, and it takes a village, and it takes, like you said, all these disciplines. So
I think it's great, and I think for students it certainly helps round out their experience on campus, provides them some different insight that they might not get in an engineering specific program, and helps broaden the mind and the experience.
Well, Bryan, I have like 10 questions that I wanted to keep going, but we're out of time. So I'm going to leave us with our last question, which is, we always ask our guests the same question, which is, Wyoming's such a great state, and it has so much going for it in the energy sector. It also is just a wonderful place to visit. As we were just talking about before we started recording, summer is an incredible time to be in Wyoming. All of the whole state. It's just amazing. It also has great attributes other times of year, but it's really special in the summer. So our last question we always ask is, if you could visit one place in Wyoming or talk about your favorite place to visit, what would it be?
Yeah, without a doubt, the Tetons are just epic, spectacular. Yeah, it's just probably one of the most beautiful places on earth. Someday I'm going to take a snowmobile ride through the Tetons and up into Yellowstone. I guess I better hop on that sooner versus later. Fishing, you've been to the Two Fly, which is a great organization. North Platte River is one of the best fisheries in the world. And I would say people need to take advantage of that. Catch and release. Get yourself a boat guide.
They're the best.
Wonderful day, even if you're not catching a whole lot of fish.
But if you're going to catch fish, if you're not super experienced like me, it's incredible. They know exactly where the fish are.
Yeah.
So, highly recommend. Totally agree. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for giving your time and your talent and your treasure back to us at the School of Energy Resources and really across the university. And thanks so much for doing the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. And thanks for your leadership in Wyoming.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every other Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.